So, hello to Practical Knife Reviews. You're probably wondering where we are. This is one of the shelters that we have out here in the woods behind my house. And yeah, we figured that, you know, if you were a hobo riding in on the rails and decided that you needed somewhere to stay in the wintertime out in a place like this, you might build a little shelter like this. So we might as well do this shelter to review this Irish made hobo knife. It's a Jowica or Jowica, don't know the pronunciation, vintage hobo knife that I had gotten online relatively recently. Take those off for this review. This would have been a very inexpensive knife, and I got it for pretty cheap, and there was a lot of problems with it. Everything was rusted. I had to clean the thing out. The blade was bent so that it fell, so the blade fell onto the back post of the fork. I had to do a lot of cleaning and fixing on this knife, but it is functional now, so why don't we take a look at it? We've got a Spearmaster Blade. Now, there's almost no spring tension left on this blade. Almost none, as you can see. Just the ever so slightest bit of spring tension at. We've got a 3-tined fork, or if you don't want to call it a fork, you could call it a threek.
A trident.
We got a little spoon. And we've got a can opener. There also was a bail at one point, but that is long gone. So, yeah, why don't we have you come on in, Ma? I'll take the camera from you while you slide down the hill and into the shelter. See, we got our...
The shelter was built in a pre-existing pit. We live in a mining area, and I'm assuming that there was some exploration in this pit, and we built the shelter over the top.
Okay, so let's see how this works. Let's see if I have this sharpened. And let me tell you, before, when I first got it, it was not sharp. It was as dull as a brick. Now, it's not the sharpest knife I've got, but it's sharp enough. Throw those into the fire pit in a second. And let's say you were EDCing this, or let's say you were a hobo that had a package delivered to your shelter in the woods. How would this cut through the cardboard? Oops, it slipped out. That cut did not go that well, if I'm being quite honest. That one was better, but let's try this direction, which is going to be the toughest as it goes through every layer of the cardboard. And actually, that's not that bad. The first cut was by far the hardest. Not great, but not bad either. Now, let's say that you're a hobo living out in your shelter here, and you don't like apple peels because you're a picky hobo. And I'm going to leave these on the ground for the mouse that lives in here.
Yes, the friendly mouse needs a little food.
Yeah, there's a mouse that lives in here. Every time we start the fire up in the fire pit, it runs around. So, I don't know, it must be living nearby the fire pit, which is just that old drum in the back there. This is going pretty well. Like a lot of these older traditional knives, the blade, which is a carbon steel of some sort, the only reason I know that is because it was rusted. The blade is very thin, a very thin stock. So it does slice quite easily once you get under it. Okay, but let's say now you're freezing to death, like my fingers are freezing.
It's a little chilly.
And you want to get a fire started. So here we've got a little bit of pine. Let's try to feather stick that. As I said, this isn't the sharpest that this knife has been. It's not the sharpest knife I have, but it's sharp enough. The trickier part here is that with no spring tension, as I try to pull it back out, the blade wants to close. So I'm having to keep my finger right under the kick here to keep it open. And as I said, this is softwood. So can you feather stick with it? Yes. It is not ideal for it. I'll be quite honest with you there. These feathers are not great. and it's not that comfortable to try to do so while trying to hold the blade open physically the entire time. So feather sticking on pine, possible, as it is with basically any knife, but not ideal. Now this corner is a little bit better in terms of the quality of the feathers that are coming out. So this face, the grain orientation must be a little bit better, which is why I decided to give it a try. Those are actually halfway decent feathers, but again, it's not that comfortable to hold the blade open. Now we've got oak, because we want our fire to actually generate some coal. Red oak is the hardest wood that we've got in the forest here. So I'm having to put quite a bit of force behind it, which is not that fun with a blade that doesn't have a lot of spring tension, as I said. And the feathers on this corner are, oh, they're getting better now. They were suboptimal. Now they're not optimal, but they're approaching that. I'm having to put, like I said, a lot of force behind it, which is not particularly fun, but those are acceptable feathers, particularly for just a small folding pocket knife. You could certainly get a fire going with that, and we will. Put that there for now. But yeah, Ma, what do you think of this knife now that it's all cleaned and whatnot? I think you probably remember how messed up it was when it came in.
I like it. I like the 3-tine fork. It's kind of a cute, looks old. And you know, the spoon and the fork combo with the knife, it's really kind of a neat looking thing.
Yeah, like I said, there was a lot of problems with it when it came in, but if you clean it up and, you know, take care of it, everything functions here. The only thing that, it's a shame that there's no spring tension left, but this is an older knife. Jowica was or Jowica, again, I'm not sure of the pronunciation, but this was just an Irish knife company that made super, super cheap budget knives. So,
and when you live in a castle like this we have right here, that's what you would have, a super cheap budget
yeah,
knife.
I mean, I'm sure they didn't even expect this knife to still be around in the year 2021, but here it is. And after cleaning it up, it's all fine, other than that one, the lack of a spring, and the fact that I should give it a little bit more love and care on its edge to give it a little bit more of a sharper finish. But we'll take it inside next, and we'll give you a close-up of it and give you the specs on it in case you happen to be perusing the internet and you see one of these and are wondering, hey, is that something that I want? So in just a bit, we'll be back inside the house and you'll be seeing this close-up. We're back on Practical Knife Reviews. I don't know why I'm spinning it, but I am, because the spoon makes a nice little spinner top. Anyway, we're here back looking at the Jowica Ireland Hobo Knife. Let's get a nice look at that. Can we get it to focus? There it is. Jowica, Republic of Ireland, and you can see the maker's mark on it to the left. As I said, this is a stainless steel of some sort. Don't know exactly what. We've got our can opener. We've got our little spoon for comparison's sake. And you can see this was pretty severely rusted. I had to sand it with sandpaper and then used case paste to kind of clean it up a little bit more than that. But compared to the size of my thumb, you can see it's just a small little teaspoon. And you can see we've got our fork with 3 tines, so you can call it a threek if you want. And you can see it would have had a bail, but that's long, long gone. My guess is this was made in probably the 70s. We've got just cheap plastic shell handles. This really was an economy knife. And as I said, the carbon steel, I only know it's carbon steel because it was rusted when I got it. So I'll take some measurements, Ma. Why don't you start talking about it?
Interesting knife with the size of the utensils for eating. Obviously, I think it's older when people ate less food. And so they didn't need quite as big of utensils to shovel the food in.
This is around 3 3/4 inches long, closed. And I'm gonna get a width measurement because that'll be important to see how it's gonna fit in your pocket. It's 1 1/8 inches wide between the fork and the spoon. So a rather thick knife that's really gonna take up a lot of space in the pocket there. Overall, in terms of length, we're looking at 6 1/4 inches. The blade is about 2 5/8 inches long with a 2 3/8 inch long cutting edge. And as you can see, quite thin blade stock. It's like you would get on most like Camp King knives and whatnot from that era. We'll take the scale out now. Check how much this bad boy weighs. Get that glare off of there. You can see 0 grams, 92 grams, which is 3.3 ounces, which is surprisingly light given that you've got a fork, a spoon, a can opener, and a blade. But keep in mind, these are just really cheap, thin. I mean, these aren't metal either. This is all plastic. Actually, that might be like aluminum or something like that, but this is just a shell scale. You can see that they are, let's see where it is, a pinch on. Somewhere. Pinch is on somewhere. Yeah, I can't see where. Anyway, they just snap these scales onto here. And that's how they are able to mass produce them so quick. They don't have to fit anything into any other pieces. This whole thing is one panel that's just snapped onto the frame. But yeah.
Is there an estimated age on that knife?
I don't know. These Jowica knives were just, like I said, budget knives that were produced en masse for super, super cheap.
Is the company still in existence?
It is not, to the best of my knowledge. It looks like it went out of business roughly like 30 years ago, sometime in the late 80s, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's been a little while since I've looked this up, because I got this in the mail a couple months ago and I bought it, and I had looked it up at that time because I knew nothing about the company. But yeah, I'm guessing that this was around the 70s. That's when they seem to have a lot of these kind of knives going out the door. Late 60s, early 70s maybe. But yeah, it's a fun knife. Only complaint, wish that the back spring was stronger, but given the age of the knife, it's gonna have flaws. And when it came to me, there was a lot of flaws, but I was able to fix all of the other ones except for that. Final thoughts, Ma?
It would be a good one to keep in your vehicle. So if you were going to have a picnic and didn't have utensils with you, I think it would be great to have in there.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be bad. I mean, if you kept like a couple cans of emergency food in the trunk of your truck or something like that, you'd have your fork, you'd have your spoon, you'd have a way of opening your cans. If you had some water in there as well, you'd be able to, eat and drink for as long as it took you to get rescued from any, blizzard that you were stuck in or whatever. So, yeah. If you see these online, they're fun knives. I like hobo knives. This one, I mean, it looks relatively nice. If you can get one in good condition, might as well buy one. It works, but don't pay a lot for it. These were budget knives, and you're undoubtedly going to find flaws with them when you get them in. But if you happen to find one, it might be worth picking up. Anything else, Mom?
Oh, that's it.
Okay, on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of Practical Knife Reviews. We'll be back with you again very soon for another review.